There are moments in history when a single night, a single storm, and a single forgotten soul reveal more about character than an entire lifetime of comfort ever could. This story begins on a coastline where the sea was feared more than respected, and where legends grew from shipwrecks rather than victories. For years, the old lighthouse on Blackwater Point had stood like a silent guardian. But by the winter of that particular year, it had fallen into decay, its paint stripped, its windows cracked, its rotating beacon unreliable. Only one man visited it regularly, and even he did so without welcome. His name was Elias Ward. To the townspeople, Elias was a failure, a man whispered about rather than spoken to. 10 years earlier, he had been a celebrated naval captain, held up as a prodigy of seamanship and discipline. But a political scandal, manufactured by rivals and embellished by the press, had ended his career overnight. His medals were stripped, his reputation destroyed, and the very officers he once led turned their backs on him. With nowhere else to go, he returned to his birthplace, Blackwater Town, where people remembered the headlines more than the truth. He kept to himself, fixed old boats, patched nets, repaired the lighthouse equipment no one else bothered to touch. And though he rarely spoke, he watched the sea with the eyes of a man who once commanded fleets. On the evening the story begins, the air carried a strange tension. Storms were common in Blackwater, but this one built itself like an animal gathering strength. The barometer dropped sharply. Wind rolled in with an unnatural howl. The lighthouse's beacon flickered and sputtered, fighting for life. As the storm surged, a coastal flood warning echoed across the town. Families hurried indoors, emergency crews scrambled, and out on the exposed peninsula, 5 maintenance workers became trapped inside the decaying lighthouse, cut off by rising water too swift to cross. No rescue boat could launch, no helicopter could fly. The authorities stood helpless on the shore, watching lightning carve the sky. Yet Elias Ward, standing among the crowd, said nothing. His coat soaked, his hair lashed by wind, he stared at the drowning lighthouse with the sharp, calculating expression of a man reading the battlefield. People noticed him only long enough to whisper, "Don't even think about going. He's reckless. He ruined enough lives already. He's no captain anymore." But the storm did not care for their judgments. The sea roared, the lighthouse shuddered, and inside it, 5 lives waited for a miracle no one believed would come. Except one man. And he walked away from the crowd, toward the storm. The wind slammed against Elias Ward like a living creature, tearing at his coat as he fought his way down the flooded causeway. Waves smashed over the stones, each one threatening to sweep him into the black water below. But he moved with the certainty of a man who had survived storms far worse, storms that had swallowed warships whole. Lightning split the sky as he reached the base of the lighthouse. The old iron door rattled violently, half torn from its hinges. Inside, terrified voices echoed down the stairwell. "Help! Someone's down there! The water's rising! We can't get out!" Elias didn't answer. There was no time. He braced the door with his shoulder, forcing it open with a sharp metallic crack that echoed through the structure. Water surged past his boots as he entered, the stairwell shaking under the weight of the storm. The entire tower trembled like a dying beast. Halfway up, a beam gave way above him, collapsing with a deafening crash. Dust and splinters exploded across the narrow steps. Elias didn't freeze. He lunged, seizing the rusted railing as debris thundered past him. For a moment, he hung between balance and death. Then he pushed upward. At the top level, the workers huddled around a failing lantern, panicked, soaked, whispering prayers. When the door burst open, they stared in shock. "Elias, you shouldn't be here." But the old captain only scanned the room with swift precision. His voice, steady and commanding for the first time in years, cut through the storm. "This tower won't survive another hit. Move!" The storm answered with a violent gust. The lighthouse groaned. The floor tilted beneath them. Elias shoved a heavy tool cabinet aside, revealing an emergency hatch none of them even knew existed. "Through here! One at a time!" A bolt of lightning struck the outer wall with a blinding flash. Stone cracked. The tower lurched. "Hurry!" Elias roared. One by one, he pushed them through the narrow crawl passage onto the sheltered maintenance ledge outside. Just as the last man escaped, a colossal wave slammed into the base of the lighthouse. The structure gave one final thunderous scream, and Elias Ward, alone inside, made his decision. He leaped through the hatch an instant before the entire upper chamber collapsed behind him, swallowed by the roaring sea. The workers stared at him in stunned silence, the storm momentarily forgotten. The disgraced captain had done the impossible. For several long seconds, the world was nothing but wind, water, and shock. The men clung to the narrow maintenance ledge, staring wide-eyed as the top of the lighthouse crumbled into the sea. The beacon, once a symbol of direction and warning, died in a hiss of steam as the waves swallowed its remains. But Elias Ward was alive. He lay on the ledge, chest heaving, every muscle trembling with exhaustion. Rain hammered against him like needles, yet his gaze remained steady, sweeping over the workers he had brought out of the collapsing tower. Despite the chaos around them, he counted each man with an instinctive precision, born of command. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His voice was quiet, but his relief was unmistakable. "You're all accounted for." The eldest worker swallowed hard. "Captain, we—" Elias cut him off gently. "I'm no captain, not anymore." But the way he said it carried no bitterness, only acceptance. Below, the sea continued its assault against the peninsula. Rescue crews on the distant shore fought through blinding rain, attempting to navigate towards them. Their lights flickered like distant stars, struggling against the darkness. Then something shifted. The workers, moments ago paralyzed with fear, now stared at Elias as though seeing him for the first time. The youngest of them, barely 20, finally spoke. "You saved us. Everyone said you were dangerous, reckless, even cursed." He hesitated, but none of that was true, was it? Elias didn't answer immediately. Lightning cracked again, illuminating the deep lines etched by years of isolation across his face. "Truth," he finally said, "isn't what people believe about you. It's what you do when belief no longer matters." The wind roared, but no one spoke. His words carried a weight the storm could not drown. Minutes later, the rescue team reached the peninsula. Ropes were thrown, harnesses secured, and one by one the workers were guided safely to the boats waiting below. But when Elias stepped toward the rope, he stopped. On shore, a small crowd of townspeople had gathered despite the storm. Among them stood Thomas Reddick, the head of the local council and one of the loudest voices who had spent years mocking and condemning Elias. The same man who had once said in public, "Elias Ward brings nothing but disgrace. Keep him away from the lighthouse." Now, as Elias approached, soaked, shivering, yet standing tall, Reddick's expression collapsed into something between shame and awe. The workers rushed ahead, shouting to the rescue teams and the crowd, "He saved us! He held the lighthouse together long enough for us to escape. He risked his life, alone, when no one else dared to go." Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Doubt, realization, regret. Reddick stepped forward, rain sliding down his face. "Elias, But Elias raised a hand, stopping him. "Don't apologize," he said quietly. "You believed what you believed, and I lived with what I knew." The simplicity of the statement cut deeper than any accusation. A young emergency officer, barely older than a cadet, approached him with trembling reverence. "Sir, I've read your old naval reports. My father served under you. He said you were the best captain he ever sailed with." Elias looked away. "That was another life." "No," the officer insisted. "Tonight proves it never ended." The workers nodded. Even the townspeople, once so quick to judge, fell silent in the presence of something undeniable. Integrity revealed not through words, but through sacrifice. As the storm began to ease, the rescue boat turned toward shore. Elias stood at the bow, staring at the ruins of the lighthouse, its shattered silhouette now black against the retreating clouds. It was a reminder. Symbols fall. Truth survives. In the quiet that followed, the moral of the night became clear, spoken softly by one of the rescued workers as he watched the disgraced captain stand alone against the dying storm. "Arrogance builds its throne on lies, but real strength, real honor, reveals itself when no one is left to applaud." And on that night, Blackwater Town learned the difference. Weeks passed, then months. The story of that night at Blackwater Point spread slowly, carried first by whispers, then by local papers, and finally by maritime journals that chronicled the near collapse of the lighthouse. But no one ever printed Elias Ward's full story. Not the accusations that had ruined him years before, not the medals he had lost, and certainly not the quiet heroism that had saved 5 lives during the storm. History, in its selective way, kept him in the margins, even as the margin itself was etched forever in legend. Children in Blackwater grew up hearing the tale of the lighthouse that stood against the flood, guided not by the rotating beacon, but by the hands and mind of a man who refused to bow to failure. Sailors passing the coast would nod toward the ruined tower, murmuring, "That's where Elias Ward saved lives nobody thought mattered." It became a moral tale. Courage and skill matter more than reputation. Integrity weighs heavier than public opinion. Elias himself never returned to the lighthouse. The structure was beyond repair, a skeleton of stone against the relentless sea. But he walked the coastline often, teaching young sailors, offering guidance to fishermen, and quietly monitoring storms as if the sea itself had entrusted him with its secrets. People called him a recluse. Some called him a hero. Few, if any, understood that both were true. Years later, when the town marked the 10th anniversary of the storm, the surviving workers gathered once more at the cliffs overlooking Blackwater Point. They spoke softly about the night when a disgraced captain became their savior. They remembered how calm he had remained, how every move had been precise, how he had forced them to trust him when trust seemed impossible, and in every retelling, one line of his stayed with them, repeated in awe and reverence. Truth is not in the eyes of those who watch, but in the hands of those who act. The moral was clear: power misused, arrogance unchecked, and reputations built on lies crumble in the face of genuine skill and courage. One man's silent virtue had turned the tide, both literally and metaphorically, and left a lesson for generations. Honor is proven in the storm, not in applause. Even decades later, when new lighthouses rose along the coast, the shadow of that night lingered. Mariners spoke of it as if it were part of the sea itself, a cautionary fable that reminded all who passed that some heroes live unseen, some victories go unsung, and some reputations are restored not by the world, but by deeds. Elias Ward remained a quiet figure, his story lingering in the whispers of Blackwater Town and the minds of those he saved. A man dismissed as disgraced had become immortal, not in history books, but in the hearts of those who witnessed the truth of his courage. And in the final words he often repeated to those willing to listen, he left a timeless truth. Courage is measured not by recognition, but by the lives it protects. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories from Histofy.